It's the final word. Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon. It's a role reversal. I'm doing a bit of late night shopping. It's one of the few times a year, Geoff, that it's late night where I am and you're having a glass of orange juice. I've had a tin of beer watching the television, having about half an hour to myself before jumping on the line with you. But such is the nature of both of our weeks, with both of us working silly hours on various projects, that we have been reduced to recording at 11:05 UK time in the evening or in the night, knowing full well that I'll be up in about 6.5 hours from now when Winnie, who's sleeping above me, so I'll play within myself a bit today, decides to wake up and start saying from her cot through the baby monitor, "Daddy cuddle, daddy cuddle, daddy cuddle, daddy cuddle," and I'll invariably go and get her at 5:42 in the morning.
Well, how can you resist? I mean, that's the work of a young genius who knows the strengths of her game. You know, she's analysed her opponent. She's worked out the weaknesses, and she's just gonna hit that spot on the pitch again and again, and you will go, I must get out of bed.
Got to go get her.
Fair play to her.
Yeah, she knows the drill. I took her to the football yesterday, not kind of for the first time really, because of course I went to the AFLW with her in I guess it was February, wasn't it, at Victoria Park, and I took her to an AFL London game a few weeks ago. But in terms of association football, shall we say, we spent Bank Holiday Monday, my only day off between, I guess, now and the end of the Bobblers Trophy and sometime in October, going up to Hemel Hempstead in about zone 12 or something to watch an away day for Dulwich, where we piled on 6 goals in the second half, and she had a grand old time identifying the ball and clapping at the right time and eating her weight in hot chips. So all is well in the Winnie world.
Very nice. I'm having flashbacks to a day. Was there a day during the World Cup when there was a non-playing day in between the semis and the final or something, and somehow we all ended up at a county match or similar at the Oval?
Ooh,
and
where were we? Just remind me where are you saying during the World Cup or the Ashes?
During the 2019 World Cup, I'm pretty sure it was.
We went to a
maybe
county
it was the
game.
Ashes. Maybe it was the Ashes. There was a day when we'd been doing a daily show every day forever, and there was something like you and me, and I think maybe Vish and Will McPherson and a couple of others had all posted things from being at this game, and Nick Tuvey was responding incredulously saying, "You've been at the cricket every day for 45 days, and on your one day off, you have all gone to the cricket."
Yeah, says that. I think I might have said this before, but someone invited people to post their favourite Simpsons jokes on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and mine was the scene where Marge is in court being cross-examined by Lionel Hutz. The only time he's actually a good lawyer, really, when he goes, "What did you do when you left the all-you-can-eat seafood restaurant?" "We drove around for 3 hours trying to find another all-you-can-eat seafood restaurant." "And what did you do when none were open?" "We went fishing." And then Hutz says, "Does this sound like the words of a man? Does this sound like a man who had all he could eat? I rest my case."
Perfect.
Well, yeah, it's a little bit like us with, when we get to that stage of a season or a summer, we kind of can't be kept away from cricket grounds, Stockholm syndrome or something like that.
It's the only place where we feel secure. Yep. Well, look, I'll do my best to operate on a morning schedule. It's not my preferred way, but I'll try to stay awake. You'll try to stay awake, and we'll get through it.
So, speaking of busman's holidays and the like, and not being able to get away from cricket grounds, I have some good news to report off the top. The artist formerly known as the Vaccine Game, where we were going to bring together a Pfizer team against an AstraZeneca team and all the rest of it. Well, as I described on, I think, Storytime a fortnight ago, that's not going to happen. I'm not getting together 2 or 3 or 4 teams. What we are doing, however, is playing at the Dulwich Cricket Club, to stay with that theme from before, on the 17th of September. They have kindly rearranged their junior presentation day to accommodate us at 4 p.m. that afternoon to play a game against the Oval Dream Boys, which is going to be captained by John Surtees, who is the boss of comms at Surrey. But the key information here is, for the first time ever, Geoff, we are going to turn out a final word 11. How we are going to do that, how I'm going to pull that off between commitments with radio, television, and Middlesex over the next week, I'm not entirely sure. However, not week, but I guess it's 2.5 weeks. But we will do it. We will make it so. There were a number of people that said they wanted to play in the Vaccine Game, so maybe I'll revisit their emails and messages to say that they very much wanted and needed to play in this T20 fixture, and then to drink the bar dry at Dulwich Cricket Club for kindly rearranging their schedule for us. But also, I suppose we will need to to arrange all the other different jobs that we said we might do on the day, like live streaming the game, for example, and scoring it and having doctors on site and all these sorts of things.
I think this is something that could be done if you harness the power of the Discord, because there are a lot of enthusiastic people in there. And so if like predominantly the people saying they wanted to play were people who were on the Patreon and were sending us messages that way, and there'd be a few outside that as well. So I'd say that's where it shall happen. We'll make a channel, and we'll try to get people to help you organise it. Help Adam, because
help me help myself.
From working with Adam for the last couple of weeks, there's nobody in the world of cricket who is doing more at this stage. That includes the people playing the Test match, because at least they get to knock off at half points, 6:30, and hop in the ice bath and whatever, and they probably don't think about it much until 9:30 the next morning. But not this guy.
Yeah, and I should, by the way, I should thank on the way through here Mark Henderson, who we had on the show a couple of weeks ago from Dulwich, talking about the girls and women's division. He was instrumental in getting us that beautiful ground. So, yes, the 17th of September, it's a Friday afternoon, final word 11. How about that? It's kind of a thing. So
it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Just before I went to bed last night, I saw the news starting to come through that Dale Steyn has finally called time on all professional cricket. He's gone the way we would have wanted him to go via quoting the Counting Crows
lyrics.
Yep, and good for him. It's interesting
Mr.
that the man
Jones let me. I wish I'd have gone with that lyric, the one Counting Crows lyric I actually know. Or I am colour blind. That's the extent of my Counting Crows knowledge. Mr. Jones or Dr. Jones, whatever it is, and colour blind. That's it. That's all I got. Which
has probably just been co-opted as a sort of anthem for white people who say, "Oh, what do you? No, I'm not racist. I don't even see colour. I don't even notice it at all." But the purveyor of the veins, the veins that used to leap out of the neck, the terrifying stare. Dale Steyn looked angrier when he did get someone out than when he didn't. It was a rare pleasure watching a wild creature go about its work on the cricket field for so long. Yeah, and that peak bit of his career, I don't really know when that starts exactly, but let's call it, say, around the Boxing Day 07,
Test.
08, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking more a year on the Boxing Day Test of 08 when he won that Test match alongside JP Duminy, more with the bat than the ball, but, both disciplines when they win the series in Oz and continuing through for a few years from there. He was just unplayable in really any country. He led the world. I remember talking to Michael Holding, massive name drop there, about this around the time that Kayisa Rabada was really blitzing and putting to him, not on air, just kind of like saying offhandedly to him, is Rabada, do you think he's the best bowler in the world now? And he kind of, in very sort of Michael Holding, self-assured kind of way, looked at me and said something to the effect of, well, maybe when Dale Steyn retires. Like he had this utmost respect for Steyn being, the best in the business. There was a good little stat pulled out, well, not stat, projection, I suppose you could call it, by Stefan Schemmel, our colleague from the BBC, who said if Dale Steyn had bowled as many deliveries in Test cricket as James Anderson at his own strike rate, which was a ridiculous 42.3. Are you kidding? That is absurd. You compare that all time. That just, Steyn would have taken 839 Test wickets. So 200 on from Anderson, and that's not to say that he is a 200 wicket better bowler than Jimmy. It's just kind of illustrating that to take your wickets at that kind of strike rate means you're a very special talent. He did it at crazy pace. He had conventional swing. I'll always remember, Geoff, that spell he bowled at the Wacker in Ricky Ponting's final Test match, where I think that's about as good as I've ever seen fast bowling conventionally. And then the spell of reverse swing at Port Elizabeth in 2013-14 against Australia to win him a Test late on the final day when he had it going the other way prodigiously, and it showed what a deep bag of tricks he had, and he was so quick and so good and so ferocious, and what a cricketer. My favourite I ever saw was the spell he bowled to Tendulkar in 2011 maybe, when India were over there, and it was hot, sunny morning, track looked flat. It was not a bowler's day, and he was getting the ball to hoop, absolutely hoop. And he got, I'm trying to think if it was, whether it was Pujara at the very start of his career or whether it was Rahul Dravid maybe, but getting the ball to basically go towards leg stump
and then swing back before it pitched, and then pitched and seam back to hit the top of off, like crazy bowling. And Tendulkar was somehow keeping this out, but like he was edging them, he was missing them, he was just surviving, and he hung on through this spell by the absolute ends of his fingernails, and I think went on to make 100 in that Test match. But just that half a dozen overs that Steyn bowled in that spell was, as good as I've ever seen Test cricket.
Do you think that watching cricket in South Africa sometimes all the bowlers look about a yard quicker? I mean, it's just, I don't know whether that's an optical illusion or something about the way that SuperSport broadcasts the game, but Steyn was part of that. Like you'd flick on the telly of a night in Australia, as I often would before I moved over here, and it's sort of prime cricket watching time, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and watching him bowl with that sort of that approach, a really distinctive approach, like sprinting to the crease, not too dissimilar to Mark Wood, I suppose, now, and that front-on action. And yet, I think when you're taught to bowl as a kid, you're conditioned to thinking that if you are side-on, you are more likely to bowl out swingers. Think conventionally. Lilly, think Damien Fleming springs to mind. There'll be others. And if you are front on, you're more likely to be able to move the ball back towards the right-hander. Well, Steyn was more or less front on most of the time and got the ball to swing away. So, yeah, he was just such a one-off, really. And it's a shame, thinking back now, that tour of Australia that he had in 16-17 ended so quickly at the Wacker, which was contributed to by falling off a surfboard, of course, which is part of it, that he's a lover of life more broadly. He's not just a cricketer.
Mr. Jones.
I remember, I think Firdose broke that story, didn't she, that he'd fallen off the surfboard or whatever it was. And yeah, he probably wasn't quite the same bowler after that, and came back and played a bit of the short form circuit stuff with the long hair and so on. But no, when he was at his best, it was with the red ball, bowling fast, bowling in South Africa, a true champion.
Liam Plunkett has also formally retired from county cricket. He's going to America. I want to live in America. I want to live in America. I want to live in America. Off he goes. He's going to turn out for the USA at age 42 or whatever it is.
Feels that way. I think at the next World Cup he's 38. I'm not completely across the qualification process here, but on the assumption that he can be eligible to play at the 2023 World Cup, and the USA would need to qualify, and they're a long way from doing that, but they're in that next tier down, so they're not without a puncher's chance of getting there. I suppose it's more likely that USA will qualify at the World Cup after, when they expand it to 14 teams.
2027.
I don't really see them getting there in the current 10-team monstrosity, which is exactly what it is.
I don't think so. I think it's fairly safe to say that's unlikely.
But still, his career will continue over there. He's married to an American, so it goes. But yeah, he's been on Surrey's books the last couple of years. There was some debate on social media today as to whether Plunkett was retired off or pensioned off too early from the England system. Of course, his final game for his country was a World Cup win where he took 3 wickets at Lords and bowled so well through that tournament. And sure, the conditions probably helped him. I didn't sort of appreciate some of the backhanded sniping at him on the way through. I mean, you can kind of be, whether it's true or not that he should have been retired off when he was retired off, or whether true is the wrong word, whether it was the right decision or not, I think we can kind of sit back and forget that and just celebrate the fact that this guy had a really interesting career, which led towards him becoming a bit of a white ball specialist. But I remember that spell he bowled at Sydney in early 2007 to knock over the Australian top order as a genuine swing bowler, and then he came back, reinvented himself as a hit-the-deck seamer, bowled quick for England when he got his opportunities at Test level in 2014, and that kind of opened up this new world as a 50-over bowler, which he took full advantage of, and he'll continue doing that. And yeah, I sort of think that it was a bit unnecessary turning it into a retrospective debate around whether he was retired early, and some people advancing the case that, well, of course he was retired at the right time. Like, who cares? Like, let's just sort of say that, who cares if we say that he was retired off too early? Does it matter an awful lot? No, it doesn't. Let's celebrate a really interesting career and one that ended with a World Cup at Lords, and he was a big part of that.
Well, it's notable that he popped up on Storytime last weekend as being part of a Test team in 2006, I think it was.
Yep,
and
that's right.
Was still a dominant part of the 2019 World Cup final. It gives you some sense of the different incarnations that he took through his career. I should mention, thinking of Storytime, we may not have it this weekend because we've got the Test on and everything else, and we're not sure that we'll get time to do it. So don't bank on it if you are, because it may not happen. I'm just flagging that now.
I'm going to go one step further. We are definitely pausing story time this week because in order to put story time on, it takes about, I don't know. Well, I don't want to put a number of hours on it, but it's a lot of hours, and there are hours that, Geoff, with your work on the Paralympics at the moment and my myriad commitments this week, I just don't see us putting in the spade work. But we will be back with it the week after when we've had a bit of a chance to take stock. But we will have daily shows every day. Hopefully that'll satisfy you if you're following our feed day to day. One other point on Plunkett before we move on. He played the only games that England lost in that World Cup were games that Plunkett didn't play. Every game he played in, they win. So correlation, causation, make your own mind up. But he was a big contributor. I love the fact that he took his 50th wicket for England, I think was in 2017, if I recall correctly, which comes a decade or 11 years after he made his debut for England, which again shows that he had to really find... He did it the hard way, and I love cricketers like that. And I admire the fact that he wants to go and have another crack at doing it a different way in a different country, and wouldn't that be wonderful if he gets a chance to be on the world stage alongside Ian Holland, who is also playing for America at the moment. That'd be kind of cool.
The Daily should be interesting. We've got, as they say, commentator Claxon, the series is poised. It's well poised. It's 1-1. India, England. We've talked a lot on the Daily shows about the minutiae of what happened during the days themselves, but the sort of broader setup of the series, not so much. I just feel like it's very 2019 Ashes in that you've got two teams with shithouse batting and great bowling attacks who are knocking each other over for ridiculous scores at regular intervals. And it's really just about who's going to get bowled out for under 150 today, and whoever does, the other side may well win the test match, or they may get bowled out themselves. I think we were saying 4-0 India after Lords, and then other people are saying 3-1 England after Headlingley. So I don't think it's going to be as straightforward as that. It's going to be a simple matter of who screws it up badly enough to win the test, which India did within 2 hours of the first one beginning. The third one, the last one. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, I do. I don't know whether our YouTube comments are necessarily a great filter for the consensus of thought, because a lot of people are getting sacked in there every single day, it seems. Oh, yeah, everyone's been sacked. The whole top six got sacked. Yes. I was like, who are you going to bring in? Who's available? Yes, I saw Pujara copping it after he made his 91. I'm like, come on, please, give me strength. Yeah. It's always good when a series is poised and dare to dream. If there's the ideal situation, I suppose, would be a nail-biting draw at the Oval where both teams get their shit together with the bat. And I don't know, I feel like this is a stupid comment, but I'll go with it anyway. Maybe England looks the more stable of the top six at the moment. I mean, I don't know. I say it, and I want to retract the comments as soon as I say it. But, Burns in good nick. Hamid looks set on the basis of one innings. I don't know how Milan on the basis of one innings. Roots having a worldly. Then they're going to have to rejig a wee bit. Yep. I mean, we know that Bairstow's wicket keeping. Where will he bat? Sam Billings has been brought into the squad as cover, but Bairstow will have the gloves. Will they keep Bairstow at 5? Will they let him bat 7? Will they find a spot for Ollie Pope? Ollie Pope, as Yasrana pointed out on the Wisdom podcast, averages 100 at the Oval. You can make a case that he likes batting at his home ground, never played a test match there. He's also barely played cricket since he got injured. Yeah, it's a risk, but on the other hand, I mean, no one's played a lot of red ball cricket before this series, have they? So if he's fit, maybe that's sufficient. Speaking of, Chris Wokes played a T20 game on Friday, played a second 11 game for Warwickshire last week. Apparently he bowled the house down in the nets today. He's clearly playing. So maybe Sam Curran, another hometown boy at Surrey, comes out for that test in favour of Curran, in favour of Wokes rather. Wokes being a right-hander, that helps to a certain extent nullify the Ashwin factor, because surely Ashwin plays, if not for Ishant Sharma, then one of the other quicks in rotation. So there's that going on. There's a bit here. Mark Wood might be fit. I mean, I don't know whether I'm going to risk... If it's me, I'm not risking Mark Wood. I'm holding him back for the 5th test match. I'm keeping my powder dry there. But, maybe they want to find a way to give James Anderson or possibly even Ollie Robinson a rest. We saw that reported in the press over here that they might look at resting one or the other, given that it is back to finish the summer or finish the series. So, yeah, as always with England, seemingly, Geoff, I can think of about 6 different combinations as to how they might set up. That's a very England thing. I mean, remember that when we were growing up in the Australian team, it was like, there would be 11 cricketers who would play for Australia and maybe a 12th if someone was out of form at some stage during the summer. It does not feel like that with England right now. It does feel volatile. There would be 11 cricketers, and there would be Andy Bickle, and that was how it would work. Yeah, some are in, some are out. You knew how things stood. If someone hurt themselves, Andy Bickle would play a Test match.
Yeah,
that was about it. Control C, Control V.
But Josh Butler's not playing either, I should say. So we might have skipped over that. So he's out of the 11 on account of the fact that his wife's having a baby, which has fueled all of this speculation that he won't play Test cricket again. And, I kind of understand where people are coming from. I get where they're coming from in that, if Birthday does well as wicketkeeper, we're kind of back to square one, aren't we? We're back to 2016, 17, 18, where Birthday was principally the wicketkeeper whose batting was...
But that's going to assume Birthday does well as the wicketkeeper. He hasn't made a lot of runs recently.
Exactly. He's got starts, hasn't he, through the series, so I suppose he's earning his keep as a bat, but it's a different story when he's got to do both jobs. He's always wanted to be the England wicketkeeper, first and foremost, and I guess a batter... Not second, but he loves the idea of being the Test keeper, being the incumbent with the gloves. So that's an interesting element to it, like the idea that Butler might be one of those who is less keen on going to Australia. I mean, we don't know that in any... He hasn't said that in as many words publicly, but there was a report during the week that up to 10 England players have said that, look, unless conditions in quarantine are sufficient to meet their standards in Australia, that they may not be interested in coming out. And look, that's bubble fatigue as well. That's a matter of families. And Geoff, you addressed this a couple of weeks ago with Daniel Norcross when he was filling in for me. In all probability, the politics of this is that they'll find a way through, right? But... between now and whenever they find a way through, you're going to see more of these stories where players in England are like, well, if we're coming out on our own and it's a hard quarantine where we can't leave the hotel room and, we're principally a white ball player, i.e. Butler, maybe it's less attractive. So, still a bit of a watch this space.
Maybe. Well, in some ways, CA's having a dry run at this with the India Women's Series, which they've had to turn upside down in order to make it happen. So there was supposed to be a test at the WACA. There were white ball games scheduled for Sydney and Melbourne. There was no surprise that those ones were moved, but they moved the test as well. The whole thing, holus bolus, into Queensland, I think with the understanding that you can't guarantee that any state border is going to stay open. You can't guarantee in Australia there could be an outbreak at any point, which means that one or other of the states gets red listed by the other one and you can't move between them. So they've just put everything in Queensland to avoid any sort of problems.
God, imagine that happens. Imagine that happens in the men's Ashes where we go to Brisbane, we all pile into Queensland and we all, that's a lot of assumptions at play here, but the whole Ashes apparatus, and this is not to diminish what you're saying about the Australia-India Women's Series, but a men's Ashes series is a big beast, huge beast. Imagine they go, well, we can't leave Queensland. Maybe we have to play an Ashes
five
test.
tests at the Gabba.
Well, I'm thinking more laterally. I'm kind of leveraging this comment more off what we've seen with the women's schedule, but maybe we're off to Townsville for an Ashes test. Maybe we're off to Carrara for an Ashes test. Wow. Maybe Scacey's going to come back from Mallorca for it. Scacey will be there at Carrara. The big light towers. They'll play it under lights with the pink ball. It could happen.
We'll get England to stop by the Big Mango, take some photos with the group. So we'll play one at Carrara for Scacey, one at Tony Island Stadium, the artist formerly known as in Townsville.
What
Maybe
about
one
Cairns?
On Hamilton Island.
What about Cairns? Well, there was a test match played at Cairns, wasn't there, back in 2003 and 2004? So it's already an Australian test playing venues. That's got to be the fourth test. And where else could we get one?
Can we knock something together on the Whit Sundays? Could we get a pitch together out of crushed coral or something?
South Stradbroke Island or something like that.
The best. Yeah, Straddy. They've got the sand mine out on Stradbroke Island. So, there'd have to be some soil available if we wanted to set something up.
I suppose what it really will be influenced by is where are the marginal seats? If my time in politics is anything to go by, Queensland has a habit of having stadiums promised at election time for fairly retail politics reasons. So I haven't quite got the electoral map in my head in Queensland these days, but that might be how we can get a stadium bunked together quite quickly where one isn't at the moment. Maybe Bob Catter can litigate the case that he gets one out in his part. Where he's Toowoomba, isn't he? No,
he's pretty much the whole northern half of Queensland.
Oh no, not Toowoomba. Right, no, I've got that wrong. He's what's the main town that sits in his electorate? There's a There's a big bastard there. Mount Isa is that's what I'm thinking. So maybe Mount Isa can be the fifth and final test, and Bob Catter can be there to oversee it. Dare to dream, as I said before.
We've got to have Test cricket because every 30 minutes someone gets ripped apart by a crocodile in my electorate.
Let 1,000 blossoms bloom.
So Bob, but Crazy Bob could get something up and running in no time at all. out in FNQ, play it on red dirt. Maybe, I don't know, do a double header with the Ute Muster, perhaps. I don't know, get the Birdsville track involved somehow. Let's treat this as a creative opportunity.
Yeah, and the one I've missed out in all of this, if we're thinking about existing test playing venues, they can go to where you and I have been before, the Ekka. Get the Ekka back up and going again, where Bradman made his debut back in the summer of 28-29. See, this is where I think sometimes we should be administrators. Yep. I think they're missing out here.
Well,
outside the box thinking.
We should be consultants for administrators because we get paid way more that way, and you don't get any of the shit when things go wrong. That's the absolute ideal. Outsource. So this is potentially, what might happen. This is what's already happened with the Australian Women's Series, where they're going to be playing one-day internationals in Mackay, which is up on the far north coast. Well, I'm sure people in Queensland will argue over what's far north and what's mid-north.
That's where one of the rugby league grounds that I mentioned before, when that's in Dawson, isn't it? Dawson got themselves a rugby league ground at some point, I'm pretty sure, in one of the elections. I think I've been there. I might have been to the opening. Anyway, it's a long time ago now.
The fine work of George Christensen, who's probably going to join up with Crazy Craig, what's his name? Who's
Craig Kelly.
I'm getting text messages from him now. They're doing a big rollout with Clive Palmer's cash, backing him to get more people to eat horse deworming paste or whatever it is that their agenda is. I liked it better when the only Craig Kelly I knew was the one that was pinching Jason Dunstall in the goal square at Victoria Park. So all of this is by way of saying that the thing that CA have managed to set up with the Queensland government has the Indian team quarantining in a sort of resort situation where they've got more access to outside. They're sort of within a larger bubble, if you will. So they're not locked up in one hotel room. They're able to move around a bit more. And so this is the sort of pitch that I think that they're making to the ECB, that they'll be able to do something like this for the Ashes players, to have them have a little bit more freedom of movement that might make it more bearable to do the 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that the right people are on it, because that's going to be a precondition of the whole thing working out. It feels as though increasingly, Geoff, that this is going to be Justin Langer's final summer as Australian coach. I just can't shake that. I can't shake that belief that he's giving it his best shot. I mean, he spent some time with a friendly journo over in WA this week, telling his side of the story about how they had a good, honest chat. He and the boys and he and the senior players, and they've gotten through it and they're all past it and so on. But
haven't they had about 6 good, honest chats? Hasn't this been the line that's been spun every time that the stories come up? It's, we've all sat down and had a heart-to-heart and we've got through it. And if at the end of the heart-to-heart the position is still, you really give me the shits, then a relationship isn't going to work out. Like, there's no heart-to-hearting that's going to fix that.
Well, it's in the same song, isn't it? Hearts to hearts and hands to hands. I mean, it's they sing a football song together and join in the chorus and punch 20 beers, maybe punch 10 cones. What we were talking about on Storytime last week, per that fan of Adam Voges back in Dominica in 2015, and get on with it. But no, look, I think in all probability, they're just running the clock out, aren't they? Because making a decision on Langer right now would vindicate the behaviour of some who've been briefing against him. It would, be seen as a media win. How sometimes it can be like, no, we won't give in to this because it will be a win for, the sort of nebulous idea of the media. So I'm sure they'll stick with it, and he might go on and win the Ashes 5-0 and they re-sign him. But I think even if they win the Ashes, that we've kind of reached that stage. I might be wrong, but it just feels like we've got to that point now where they'll allow him to have the glorious exit at the end of the Ashes, as so many players have done over the years. He'll get to
as he did
as player and as coach, and he'll say that
let him have the perfect 5th test. Out you go, or they lose the Ashes, and it makes it very easy for CA to say, oh, well, time to move on. Because, not to lose sight in this that, England might be sort of two-thirds of a team at the moment, but at least they've been playing cricket. Like, at least people are criticising them because they've been playing a lot of test matches and haven't been playing so well in some of them. Australia hasn't played a fucking test match. They will have played 4 in nearly 2 years by the time they start the Ashes.
Yeah, I mean, you think about Nathan Lyon's trip through the 390s. It's going to take him about 2 years to get from 390 wickets to 400 wickets. And that's no exaggeration. It's going to take him almost 2 years.
He's like Odysseus trying to get home. He's never going to get to 400.
Yeah, so that's all kicking off in the background. Geoff, before we finish the first segment, remiss of us not to reflect on the passing of Ted Dexter during the week at age 84. Fair to say that Ted Dexter was an ideas man who lived life to the full in, every possible way, really. But as a batsman and as a stylist, 62 test matches across a decade between 1958 and 1968. 30 of his tests as captain, including the tour of 62-63 to Australia, where they won that first test at Melbourne that we've talked about on Storytime before, in excess of 4,500 runs at 48, great numbers, made 9 test centuries, most well known for maybe the 70 he made against Griffith and Hall at Lord's Test, which ended with Colin Cowdrey walking out with the plaster cast on his hand, where they drew in the final over in 1963 at Lord's. I think that in some respects the mantra that he talks a lot about as a coach or as a player, a post player, about playing beside the ball has been quite relevant recently to the conversations that a lot of former England players who played not under Dexter strictly speaking. He wasn't the coach, but he was the chairman of selectors, and he drilled it into that generation of players. You don't play behind the ball, you play side on, you play next to the ball. And that's exactly what we're seeing from Joe Root at the moment. I'm not sure if you caught that ECB clip, Geoff, on social media. They posted every delivery, or every scoring shot rather, of Root's 121 at Leeds last week.
That. And I've been interested to see that before. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in my life doing things like reading text commentary of innings back and reconstructing them based on shot by shot. But that's always been one of the frustrations with watching highlights, is that, they'll show you 13 boundaries but nothing in between. And I suppose that the balls that you leave and defend are also relevant. They're also part of the story, but a lot of it's also about how do you score when you score. And so much of that Root innings is about backing away a little bit or just shuffling the feet a bit, just making room to play through the offside to find a relatively risk-free way just to turn the strike over again and again to good pace bowling. Yeah,
well, A, it's great content using the modern term. B, it kind of reinforces that Dexter point, right? Like, how many times do you see Root in that compilation just playing the ball carefully between, let's call it, cover point and third man? And that's born of the fact that Root's talked about this as well, hasn't he, that he had 2 trigger movements back in 2019 when he was getting in trouble to the straight ball. So by definition, more front on as the ball was arriving. Now he just goes back straight and has a more side on approach to the ball, and that seems to be suiting him pretty well given he's clocked 6 tons this year. So I found that interesting from a cricket perspective. But yeah, back to Dexter, married the French model and all the rest of it, and had that horrible, quite graphic incident with the Jaguar that ended his career, where he kind of nearly had his calf taken off, literally had to put a piece of his calf back in to the side of his leg. He was a selector during a pretty tough time for English cricket in a way, when you consider that it's 1989 to 1993, but in a different kind of way. That's an interesting generation that came through under him, players like Mike Atherton, for example, and that really wonderful series they had in the West Indies in 1989-90, that was a series that he was overseeing.
It may have just been a problem that he brought the same mindset from his batting to his selecting. Got to score as many runs as possible, got to select as many players as possible. Just got to rack up the numbers. He probably did rack up a ton within that decade, the way they went through.
Yeah, I mean, and you hear those players talk about him sort of being there in the leathers when he was riding his motorcycle. He's probably in his 60s by that stage, but had that that disposition. And then I suppose in terms of his biggest lasting legacy, according to his own words, was that he developed the player rating system. He dreamt it up in the 80s, and it became, I guess, what we now use more than ever before. Like, how often do we refer to a player going up to number 1 in the rankings or whatever it is? Well, it was Dexter who was a big part of informing that algorithm, which it's not a small thing to do on the way out. He was admitted to the ICC Hall of Fame during the World Test Championship final this year, so a lot of lovely words were spoken of him then. Lord Ted, as he was known, the Cavalier player, and had that kind of life of an aristocratic Brit of a certain age at a certain time, where he was able to lead a certain life which would be unachievable and unattainable for most people, but he certainly made the most of it and gave a great deal of that to cricket.
Yep, well done, Lord Ted. Farewell, and I'm glad that he got into that Hall of Fame before he decided to take his leave of this plane of existence.
Geoff, before we wrap up the first segment of our show today, I think that we will, as is the custom on the weekly show, just find time for a tiny little spot of... Nerd Pledge.
Nerd Pledge. The reverse quiz, the game that we play with people on our Patreon page. We need to find ways to fund the show. And one thing that happens is that people send us contributions to play this game, and what they do is they send us an amount of currency, but it's not a normal number, not a round number. It's a specific number. It's a niche number, and it's specific because it relates to cricket in some way. They know how, and we don't, and we have to try to work out what it is.
Yes, we do. And the number we have this week is an unusual one. I think it's the first time we've received this number. I'll explain. It's 0.00 from Adrian Scotty Muller. His clue reads, and this will help inform what you're about to tell us about, Geoff, I'm sure. I love the shows, and I'm sponsoring you as a Julio at $10. So he's not in for a penny, in for a pound. He's in for a penny, in for $10. But my number is 0. I know that's not actually a number. More precisely, 0.00. My brother Chris reckons I was never much chop with the willow, but I'm reasonably confident that I was a better batsman than this chap. Here we go, Geoff. Have fun with it.
I love this, and I love this also because, apologies to Adrian, I actually missed this one because he did come in as a Julio. Some people don't play Nerd Pledge, they just send a round number and that's it, and we love and welcome them. And so Adrian, bless him, was chipping in $10, and I thought, all right, that's a $10 Julio. And then he said, actually, there is a number attached to this. So we're running a bit late with Adrian because this number dates back to maybe it's November last year. So if you're hearing that, don't panic that we're only up to November. I think we're a fair way further on than that. But 000, and given the time that it came in, I figure it pretty much has to be about Zaheer Khan, not the Indian fast bowler with the 300 and whatever test wickets, but Zaheer Khan Pakteen, who was an Afghan kid who debuted just after he'd turned 20 in 2019. He's a left-arm wrist spinner. He's still around in national consideration, but at the time Afghanistan were playing a test series against Zimbabwe, and I think that series had just come to an end. And at the end of this series, Zaheer Khan had batted 6 times in test cricket and had made 0 runs in test cricket. He'd been out 3 times for a duck, and he'd been stranded on not out 3 other times. So he'd started that against Bangladesh. He was not out in his first innings, so abandoned because Rashid Khan was on 50-something and tried to put one over the fence and it didn't work. There's a certain theme that indicates a lack of faith from his teammates in the batting ability of Zaheer Khan because every time he's not out, it's off about 2 balls. Like they're not hanging around when he comes out at number 11. So he was not out in both innings against the West Indies and then made a pair against Zimbabwe. So it hasn't gone well with the bat, but he has played in 2 test wins out of his 3 matches, and he's taken 7 wickets at 34. So he's not going too badly. But then
we might see him. We might see him in Australia, Geoff. That we've heard today. I mean, I don't know what to take from this, but we've seen reports this evening, my time, that the Afghanistan tour has been greenlit by the Taliban. I mean, I can't. That's a really weird sentence to say out loud, but such is the state of global cricket right now that's actually a thing. So yeah, maybe we'll see Zaheer Khan, young Zaheer Khan, that's taking the field at Hobart in November.
Well, we can only hope and hope to see him do something with the stick. But it was also worth noting something I noticed while looking at this series in the same test, one of the same tests where Zaheer Khan played and made a pair. He didn't play in the other test in that series, but someone who played in both tests in that series was the Zimbabwe player Wesley Madaviri. Now, He bowls some off-spin, Wesley Mataveri. He debuted in that series, played both of his tests in that series and hasn't played since, perhaps unsurprisingly. He was not required to bat in the second innings of the first test because they won by 10 wickets, but they lost the second one, and in the second one he made a pair. So he was out for naught each of his 3 innings in the series. He made a first ball duck in the first test, and in the second he made another first ball duck and then a third ball duck. But he's not a tail ender. He was batting at number 5, Wesley Mataveri. He does not have a very good record at lower levels. He's got I think he averages about 20 in first-class cricket, but he's made some runs in T20s, and maybe they figured he was a sort of a punt player not a Rishabh punt, but just a take-a-punt player, but maybe both, to pop in the middle order and see what happened. Anyway, didn't quite work. No surprises, he hasn't played since. They did play a couple of tests recently, Zimbabwe, and Wesley Mataveri was not part of it. But as it stands, he is the only player in Test history to have 3 dismissed ducks and nothing else in a whole Test batting career. Nobody else has just played and been out 3 times for naught, and that's it. It's never happened.
Because we've had pairs to never play again, but no one's done it thrice.
Yes, quite a lot of pairs to never play again. Chad Sayers, Dr. Sayers was one. Maybe the most recent one, Gavin Hamilton, your mate. Fred Grace.
Never return my WhatsApps. Fred Grace died on the boat afterwards.
Hard to be a brother of someone better than you, Fred Grace.
I was talking about Fred Grace's passing recently, as one does, with somebody, and I'm not sure, we did quite a bit on this on Nerd Pledge at some point, story time at some point, and we heard about him dying because he had the wet mattress on the boat. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
The wet mattress on the boat back from, or the boat to, probably the boat from Australia on an early Ashes trip. I suppose it wasn't even the Ashes at that point. Maybe it was just. He was afflicted with pneumonia, and that did him in at age 30, I think, the doctor's brother.
Right. Although it was very much a thing at the time to blame someone's illness and death on some really specific incident, and then that would just be picked up as an article of faith and repeated in obituaries and so on, and then keep being, they'd say, he was never the same since there was a small explosion at the match factory that startled him in 1788, and he never got over the shock, and people just repeat it because they've heard it often enough. So whether it was a wet mattress, I don't know. But speaking of pairs in the only test you've ever played, another Afghanistan player from the same Zimbabwe series nailed that feat. So Abdul Malik Khan, who was opening the batting in one of the tests, he got a first baller and a third baller, just like Wesley Mataveri, and he was playing in the same series. So he hasn't had a chance at a third innings to see if he makes a third duck opening the batting, and may not. Rashid Patel, who was a 1980s Indian left armour, he got a pair in his only test. A couple of 1940s Kiwis named Len Butterfield and Gordon Rowe, and then there are 4 ancient South Africans from before World War I. But among their number and in their era, someone who nearly qualifies but doesn't quite, because he only played 1 innings in his test career and had 1 duck from his 1 test match, was Stanley Snook, who was the older brother of Tip Snook. We always hear from Tim Wigmore that younger siblings are better players. So Tip Snook, better player. Stanley Snook, 1 duck in his only innings. WG, made a shitload of runs. Fred Grace slept on a wet mattress and died. Doesn't work if you're the older sibling. That's the way it is. So that's where I think somewhere in there is the 0.00 for Adrian Muller, and thank you for your patience, Adrian.
Appropriately, we're talking about 0.00 because supported as we are by Brick Lane Brewing, the Brick Lane Brewing Corporation.
Segue.
Brick Lane Brewing Community. Stop calling it the Brick Lane Brewing Corporation, out of the Brick Lane Brewing Community. Far better that way. They now produce a low alcohol beer because there is now more demand for low alcohol beer than ever before. They find that in surveys. They find that in research. Indeed.
The survey says.
And I'm not surprised. You mentioned Tim Wigmore. Tim Wigmore has written many, many articles for many publications about, lots of topics, associate cricket being one of them. But another topic he enjoys, when he does a bit of social commentary, is that people get on the piss less now and they party less. This is an England study. He's basically gone through and worked out that nightclubs, there are fewer pills taken, there are fewer beers drunk and fewer nightclubs open. He's pretty much making the case that we're a generation of wowsers, and he links it all back to the joke.
Has Wiggy considered that maybe this is just happening around him? You know?
No, there is some empirical research that's been done here. He links it all back from memory to the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and I guess the relative levels of disposable income. However, I'm getting off topic. My point here is that there is a low alcohol offering, so I'm not sure whether it's 0.00, but
it's not.
Right down.
I'll tell you about it. It's
okay.
I think it's 1.1%.
Okay.
It's not a nothing, but it might as well be nothing, unless you'd need to be trying to shotgun about 30 of them in an hour.
You need to be our bloke at Dominico we mentioned on Story Time. I've already referenced him once, but the 10 cones and 38 beers. Now, if you add 10 cones to 38 1.1 beers, it's still going to be a fairly hefty day on the tonk. But you've got to really want it.
1.1% cones. I'm sure you can get that in America now, where they've got the massive weed industry that all of the senators and like people in Congress are investing in. They're like, yeah, it's fine. We'll leave everyone in jail who used to sell weed because they don't look like us. But we'll all invest in it and get rich. I'm sure they've invented like the mid-strength cone and the Foster's Light Ice cone, if you will. So, but to come back to Brick Lane, I think
but let's get off cones and back to the cones and back to the task at hand.
Yep. So one issue that you've had with low alcohol beer is that generally a lot of the time it's tasted shithouse, and it has not been afforded the same care by those making it because whatever. It's not like there are many choices. Like if you don't want to be drinking full strength beer, then you take what you can get. So Brick Lane care about people, and so they've made a hazy IPA, which is 1%. A hazy IPA is the god tier of beer for my reckoning. Like it's an incredible style of beer, but to make that as something that you can have several of at a barbecue and safely drive home, that is the work of genius, and that is why I love Brick Lane.
It reminds me of a joke about how low alcohol beer was seen in a certain era. How many beer drinkers does it take to change a light bulb?
How many?
None. They never touch light.
Oh, yeah. Elbow in the ribs.
But no, we do, and we're grateful that the hazy IPA exists. We're grateful for the relationship we have with Brick Lane, and we're thrilled to say that because of this, Adrian Muller will be in a position to gift a slab of Brick Lane. Any Brick Lane, doesn't have to be the hazy IPA low alcohol. It can be any of the beers in the range that tick the box. I'm not sure exactly which ones sit on the voucher that we're going to send you, but we are going to send you a voucher, Adrian. It's going to come into your inbox. You don't need to do anything. Don't need to send us an address or a postcode or a self-stamped envelope or anything like that. We will simply email you through the details as to how you can on-send a slab of the Brick Lane Brewing community best to where you want it to go. It can go to you. It can go to someone else. It's up to you.
It can go to anyone in Australia. So assuming you're in Australia, Adrian, you can have it. Or you can be the Father Christmas of beer for somebody else in September. Why not? There'll be one day in September, Adrian, when you send someone a slab.
And a few other points to make here. One is that we would love you to follow Brick Lane on all the social media platforms. They're in our show notes. We'd love you to take a photo having one of their drinks and tagging them in, tagging us in. That'd be lovely. We'd love you to visit them at Queen Victoria Market or there in Dandenong where I grew up. That'd be cool.
Well, probably not at the moment, given everything's in lockdown.
Everything's in lockdown. That's a really good point. That's quite naive of me, living in the UK where nothing's in lockdown. But when in the fullness of time, you can still, I'm sure, access this when you go down to the shops and go to the bottle shop and all the rest of it. Or, as Jay points out in his voiceover off the front, you can buy the hoodie, which would be nice. I'd love to have a Brick Lane hoodie. At some point, I will make sure that I get a Brick Lane hoodie. I'm a wearer of hoodies. I've only got about 3 in the rotation, but gee, I wear them lots. I think that's a lot. Brick Lane Brewing community. They're our friends. They're your friends. And now, thanks to the voucher we're about to send you, Adrian, they're your friend as well. Follow them. Be with them.
Hi, I'm Isha Gua, and you're listening to The Final Word with Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon.
It's The Final Word. Adam Collins, Geoff Lemon. It's nearing midnight in London. I'm spent. Geoff's drinking orange juice still. He's happy. We still have more to talk about before we wrap up the show. Quite a bit going on in England, and we should just quickly skip through the domestic stuff more than the international stuff, because we're only in August, which means we've got an entire month of cricket to go. And this tends to be the month of September where trophies are decided and all the rest of it. And there's going to be an international series between England and New Zealand's women that's starting on Wednesday. 3 T20s followed by 5 one-dayers. I'm doing 7 of 8 of those for Sky, so I'll be floating around on television if that's your thing.
I will make the point, Adam, that in 2 minutes' time, at the time of recording, it will be September in the UK. It's already September here.
Oh yeah.
But you said August. That's not going to be the case. It's literally 2 minutes to midnight.
That's true. That's true. Which will mean that I said to Rach this morning that she's going to have to deal with me being unbearable playing big sound all through September, or as long as GWS are in the comp. I gave it a blast with Winnie this morning when changing a nappy this morning. I was giving it huge, singing big sound, and I had to explain that this will be part of our nappy changing routine through September and needs to be part of Winnie's life as well. Where are we? England women's domestic cricket. That's where we are. Mm-hmm. We're seeing players called up from the 100. This was a cool thing, I reckon. We're seeing runs made and wickets taken in the 100 directly influencing national selection within weeks. I mean, this is isn't what it was all about exclusively. The 100 isn't there just for England selection, but it's definitely part of it. It should be part of it.
Well, it's the massive advantage factor that we saw from the WBBL in Australia, that given that it started 6 years ago, they've developed now what's increasingly a generation of players who've been developed through the Big Bash, and it meant that Australia has a much bigger reserve pool of players than any other country who have played a decent standard and can be up to it when they come into the international team. That's not been the case for England, and so that's part of what they're trying to build. So, Tim Wigmore may say that nobody's pinging anymore, but a couple of pings for Maya Bouchier and Charlie Dean. They got called up into the squad, and then they've both been pinged out as COVID contacts. So I'm not sure they were going to make the 11 for the first match, but they're sitting out the first match, and now Emma Lamb has been called up as cover for them to potentially be available for the first 11. Yeah,
great story, Emma Lamb. She made a century earlier in the season on the same day that her brother did for Lancs, Danny Lamb, and she made another 100 in, I think I'm right in saying, the Rachel Hayhoe Flint. She's made runs in the Charlotte Edwards Cup. I think she's second or third on the run scorers list there. So, wonderful to see her get that opportunity, albeit as cover at the moment. But if not for the domestic structure, and this is kind of bolstering your point from before, Geoff, if not for what has been built underneath the England team, that there's no way players like Emma Lamb are getting that exposure, and now they are. And now they're getting call-ups, and that's a positive cycle that we should be supporting.
Yep, New Zealand are there, ready to play the series. They've been playing some intra-club games. My first thought when I saw that was it's probably the only win that any of them will get all tour. Given I'm a bit disillusioned with the state of New Zealand women's cricket at the moment. Not the players' fault, but there doesn't appear to have been... I know there are people in that system who work their asses off, but maybe more broadly sort of top down, they just went, we've got some generational players, in Bates, Satterthwaite, Devine. Look, Amelia Kerr came through. I mean, Amelia Kerr made herself. She was a good cricketer by the age of 14. It's not like NZC created that player. And then that's about it. They just went, no, we're good. We'll be a good standard forever. And they're not. The rest of them aren't up to scratch, really.
Yeah, they've got that kind of thing about, what is it, the footy team that draws the intra-club, whether they actually go on and win a game on tour. A few things to add to that. I spoke to Susie Bates last week, who is back in business, had a long chat to her for my column in the cricket paper. It's the first time, this was lost upon me a little bit, so there's Bates, who's missed the better part of 2 years, but especially since last October, that the internationals that you were covering for the ABC, Geoff, when she did her shoulder. She originally thought that wasn't going to require surgery. In the end, it required serious surgery. So serious that she considered quitting cricket altogether. So she's not bowling at the moment. She's playing purely as a batter. But before she was missing, Amy Satterthwaite was missing for about a year on mat leave after having her baby Grace. So it's been a really long time since Satterthwaite, Bates and Devine, who missed a number of games earlier this year, which she took some time off on the basis of feeling as though she needed some time away from the game to freshen up. In fact, she's spoken quite frankly, about the mental duress she was under at the time. So all three of their biggest stars have spent serious time away from the game through COVID, and indeed before COVID, with Amy Satterthwaite missing that World Cup in 2020. So, yeah, the coach Bob Carter said during the week that he's chuffed to have all three of them on the park. Unfortunately, no Amelia Kerr, who's elected to sit out of this series on mental health grounds. She didn't want to make the trip to England, so that is a real shame because Amelia Kerr's an absolute star. But they have real belief about the World Cup next year in New Zealand. I don't think it's a million miles away from where actually the New Zealand men were in 2019. They rocked up in England with like no prep for that World Cup. They hadn't played good 50-over cricket for a couple of years, and they ended up having a great run, as we know, and made the final and, barest of margins and all that. So I think that New Zealand feel as though, and, it's not the first time you and I have made this observation, Geoff, that the golden generation have one last chance. Well, it's for real this time. They've got one last chance, and it's in New Zealand, at home, a World Cup. It means a tremendous amount to Bates personally and her colleagues. And look, yes, they probably aren't going to be as strong. They're definitely not going to be as strong on paper as Australia and England, but at least they're getting the opportunity to play 8 games against England. 5 of them will be 50-over games. Then they've got a home summer. So they have a bit of a build-up if they are going to get their act together and find a combination, a formula that might get them towards the pointy end of a tournament. And if they get to the Final Four, well, anything's possible.
It is, and who knows. And I will say, I would love to see it happen. I'd love to see them take that one last chance and get to a final and have the opportunity to do something special. I don't see it happening. I can be pretty frank about that. Like, they don't have an 11, they don't have a 9. They'll put out 3 or 4 players who are up to the mark, and all of the pressure is on that big 3 that you mentioned. They're supposed to do everything. They're supposed to win every game for New Zealand, and if they don't, then it won't happen. There's the next level down just isn't there, and they're trying to patch holes in an 11 even when they've got all of their first choice players available. So it's just not a recipe for success.
Susie also, I was probing her on this really about Test cricket. Of course, she made a debut 15 years ago. She made a debut for New Zealand, and she's 33 years of age now, so she's been going around for a long time and never had a chance to play a Test match. This obviously should be a multi-format series. It's a real shame that it's not. And Bates made the point to me that, the formula's there now, isn't it? 3 T20s, 3 one-days, a Test match, and away we go. And even though she wasn't far away from giving cricket away, if her shoulder wasn't quite right in this rehabilitation process, she said that she'll try and hang on because if she thinks it's possible that there might be a Test match on the horizon, that might be enough to extend her career a little bit. She isn't making any commitments beyond the 2022 World Cup, but if she feels as though they might end up snagging a Test match in 2023 or 2024, and look, we saw Todd Greenberg from the ACA last week arguing strongly on behalf of the Australian women having more opportunities to play red ball cricket domestically and with a view to playing more Test cricket. Presumably that would loop in New Zealand at some stage. So, there is some hope there for Bates and others who might get that chance.
I think the issue here, and I haven't investigated this, so I'll preface that. It's not like I've put in the calls to back this up, but what I suspect is that the reason there's no Test match in this England series is that New Zealand cricket don't want it. I'm sure that I feel pretty confident that if NZC had backed the idea, then the ECB would have gone with it. They did for the India series, so why not? But it's New Zealand cricket who don't want to get themselves on the hook for paying for women's Test cricket in return. They don't want to have to put on Test matches when teams tour New Zealand because that costs money. And New Zealand cricket is operating on a much, much smaller budget than any of the big 3 countries in cricketing terms, both in their men's and their women's cricket. But their number one objection to it is cost. It costs money to put a game on for 4 days. It's harder to sell than it is to sell T20s and whatnot. So it's better to cram in as many white ball games as you can. They don't want to have to do it when Australia go to New Zealand. They don't want to have to do it when India go to New Zealand. And so if New Zealand cricket agree to play any away Test matches, they potentially have to pay for the hosting of home Test matches.
Yeah, it's fairly sound logic. You're dead right about New Zealand cricket not having an interest in playing women's Test cricket. Again, this is something that Bates is fairly upfront about in the context.
They've got an active
this series
to it. They have expressly said they don't want to do it.
Yeah, that's right. And look, these things can change, right? It's only a few summers ago where there were insiders at senior levels of CA that didn't want 50-over cricket for women. They thought only T20. And now the Australian administrators have been on a bit of a journey, and now we're hopefully at a stage where we'll see more of these multi-format series. Of course, India are playing a test match and England this summer, which is obviously a great thing. But yeah, I reckon that it is a bit of a stumbling block with NZC. I didn't mean to sort of impugn the ECB by saying this should be a multi-format series. I'm certain that, as you say, if there was a consensus there that they wanted to do it, they would have found room. But unfortunately, it's not to be. It would have been a nice way to have capped off what's been a wonderful domestic season here. Of course, we've got the Rachel Hayo Flint Trophy, more cricket to come. The Charlotte Edwards Cup has been continuing. We've sort of seen, again, players from the 100 like Alice Capsey doing great things, and Geoff, I was issued with a reminder of how young that Alice Capsey is today when a statement went out from Surrey which was celebrating the fact that she's been picked to play in the school games. Now, I wouldn't have a Scooby what the school games are, but you're only playing in the school games if you're a kid, and Capsey, despite her enhanced stature in the senior game, is still very much a work in progress. I mean, she's 16 years of age, for Christ's sake. I mean, it's remarkable that she's been able to do so much so quickly, and she can't be far away from an England call-up, like a proper senior England call-up. I'm sure she'll end up making her international debut when she's like 17 or 18, the way things are trending.
I know what the school games were down the creek across the road from Eltham High. Fastest sprint across the road away from the teachers. The hydro engineering category, all the rest of it. I mean, kids doing useful things at school age, it just staggers. Like, it boggles my mind. I don't know. Like, all I was thinking about was how to make homemade explosives, or just ways to fritter away your youth, and then you see these high achieving teenagers. It's just a bizarre thing. I can't understand it. It's like a dog walking in on its hind legs carrying a tray of martinis. You're like, hang on, you're not supposed to be doing that. You're 17. You're supposed to be setting fire to a bus. Look, good on her, Alice Capsey. Bit of chat around saying that she's got to come to the Ashes. She's got to go to India. She's got to go to India. Yeah,
I don't think they should do that. I think asking a 16-year-old to quarantine for a fortnight in Australia before... No, let's... one step at a time. England is sorted for Ian Wiz when it comes to having players ready to come to Australia, right? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But, there will be plenty of opportunities for her soon enough. Great to see Eve Jones leading the Charlotte Edwards Cup runs. Hypercourse, the great man, made this point on Twitter as well, playing for the Central Sparks. She is kind of who it's all about when it comes to having a domestic structure. She was there as a productive member of I'm pretty sure it was the Loughborough Lightning in the first year of the Kia Super League. I'll be corrected on that if I'm wrong. But the point here is that she gets the chance in the Super League, which would have meant that she was a professional cricketer for 8 weeks a year or something like that for a number of years. But now she's a proper professional cricketer as one of these contracted regional players. That doesn't mean mega bucks, but it does mean that she can dedicate more time to developing as a player, as she has. So leading the runs in that comp, we've already touched on Emma Lamb. She's second on that measure. And Georgia Adams, who keeps on keeping on, in excess of 200 runs for the Southern Vipers. The Vipers are playing against the Northern Diamonds in the semi, and the winner will take on the Southeast Stars, who are based at the Oval in the final of that 20-over competition. Bryony Smith for the Stars is leading the wickets, and players like Nicole Harvey from the Western Storm and Tara Norris from the Vipers. I mean, they are far from household names, even in the women's cricket community. Far from household names, like even in our little world, like and that's a good thing. It's a great thing that this other group of players, I think Harvey's 27 or 28 years of age. I mean, they never would have had any prospects of being able to influence major competitions like this until the change in structure. So, that's an exciting finals day, which is coming up, I think, on the 5th of September, so this time next week.
So many competitions in English cricket. I'm quite jealous in a way because, in Australia we'll jam the 50-over thing into 2 weeks in September and then have Shield in October, November and March or April, whatever it is. But there's not this glut of cricket at the next level down. The Champo is back, the Bob Willis. Yep. I did the county blog for The Guardian the other day. So it was probably my first time really engaging with county cricket as a thing. Like I've been to lots of county grounds and doing things like Australia playing tour matches against the cream of the crop of Essex when Jesse Ryder was opening the bowling and that sort of thing. But as someone who famously on this show couldn't name all 18 counties, trying to cover them all. I'm going to say I was one person who was relieved that one of the games was cancelled because all of the Surrey team got pinged out with COVID close contacts and couldn't go to Durham, because it meant there were only 8 games to cover instead of 9. Because doing that at 3 or 4 in the morning started to get pretty tough. Going, okay, who's doing what where? Who's playing on which ground? Which shire is it? But it's exciting at the same time, having 8 games all starting at the same time. And I was running a competition of like who was the run leader on the day, like who's got the highest score as of 11 a.m, that kind of thing. In terms of individual players, you've got all of these former England openers who are not doing so well. All the number 9s and 10s were making runs. The ones who weren't making runs were Dom Sibley and Alistair Cook and Adam Lyth and Mark Stoneman and Sam Robson and all these players who have opened up for England. Tough at the top of the order, cash in down the bottom if you're a 9 or a 10 apparently. Smack 40 off 20 balls when your team's 9 for 120. There was a lot of that going around. So it was chaos, but it was good fun.
Yeah, so... Well, we're into the divisional stage, so the 6 teams that came top 2 in each of the conferences comprised Division 1, then the next 6 are in Division 2 and the next 6 in Division 3, which has caused some consternation. Might return to that in a minute. But yeah, Division 1, Warwickshire, Lancashire, Yorkshire, Hampshire, Notts and Somerset, and the results aren't necessarily going the way that you might think after a couple of days either, so I won't go through them because it'll be redundant by the time this podcast is published. But yeah, the game I'm doing at Lords, where Middlesex are playing Derbyshire, that's in Division 3. So, and look, it's still a first-class game, and a lot of first-class games are played where you cannot win the competition. Indeed, an entire division, that being Division 2, until last season, you played the whole season and couldn't win the comp. So I do balk a little bit at the criticism. I acknowledge that it doesn't look great that 4 games are played at the end of the year in what's called Division 3, where they are playing for, some would say playing for pride, others would say they're playing for a tiny bit of prize money. But yeah, it does give the chance to blood a few players, think about next year, start the rebuild a fraction early if you're a side that's not gone so well, which is kind of the case with Middlesex. Steve Finn has signed a contract with Sussex this week, much to the dismay of Anna Forsyth. She was in our YouTube comments today. You'd know Anna, of course, if you listen to Storytime, a regular correspondent of ours on the Final Word. Steve Finn, super fan, I should say. But no, that's emblematic of where, say, Middlesex are looking to the next generation and signing up young players on long-term deals, giving them a chance to play in these final 4 weeks. So it's not for nothing when you're thinking about the longer-term strategy. Quite a good game.
Well, didn't it used to be pre-divisional? Wasn't it all 18 counties in the one table, in which case probably about 14 of them were playing for nothing because you just wouldn't have, there was no relegation, you wouldn't have been
absolutely in the run. And this is where the rose-coloured glasses bullshit with county cricket drives me fucking crazy, right? So there is a huge swathe of county fans who completely rose-coloured glasses yesteryear when it was what was a 17-team comp before Durham joined in 92, I think it was, where, yeah, you're right. And you often read this in players' memoirs from the time. It's like, they're by June usually July, but sometimes June, you know who the 2 teams are who can win the comp, and then there is 15 who can't. That isn't great either. That's partly why they brought in 2 divisions, by the way, but that does mean that half of the teams cannot win the competition that they're starting off with. So, yeah,
even with 2 divisions, you might have 2 or 3 teams who might drop or 2 or 3 teams who might go up.
That's right.
But aside from that, if you're finishing bottom of the second, it doesn't matter. If you're finishing middle of the first, it doesn't matter. I think of these teams as the Everton of cricket. Like if you're in that, if you're always finishing in that middle of the table where, congratulations, you're 8th out of 20 again. Well, it doesn't really mean anything. That's as meaningless as playing 4 games in a divisional structure. And
it definitely creates bad habits. So you think about what Division 2 was. Some of these clubs became glorified feeder clubs. I mean, how many players have been developed by Leicestershire who have ended up elsewhere? I mean, even just last week, a player left Derbyshire. Now, granted, he was from the Sussex system, but he was leading them for wickets in all 3 competitions, and he leaves them with a month to go in the season. And the point I'm making here is simply that if you are in Division 2, getting out isn't just a case of kind of doing what Gloucestershire did a couple of years ago and developing a team over a number of years. If you are starting off at a huge disadvantage financially, now this is where the salary cap's a problem. You can pay up to a certain level, but there's no minimum. One implement I would bring in would be, well, you've got to pay a minimum of, say, 90% of the cap. And if that needs to be subsidised by the ECB, so be it. Because the disparity in wages between, let's call them traditional second division counties, I hate that, but, smaller clubs Geoff, you were at Derbyshire a couple of years ago, a club's budget like Derbyshire. You compare that to Surrey, who are able to pay all the way to the top of the cap. That's too big a gap. That's not what we want across the game. And I think that having the conference system to an extent helps mitigate that, because you start each year with all 18 teams at least a chance of being able to go all the way, which does hopefully encourage good habits. And then you get this pointy end where the creme de la creme are playing against each other, in theory at least, is what we've got at the moment. Yeah. So, but yeah, there's a way to go there. I'm on another ep of the final word. Maybe we won't do it today. I'll skip through my restructure of the season where we can fit the 100, the 50 over comp, the blast, and the championship all in without crossing over each other. I have found a way to do it.
I'm sure you have.
I've done the Rubik's Cube in 32 seconds and made it all add up as it should. That's a bit of a
when you said that Ted Dexter
there,
had worked out how to do the player rankings, the thought did strike me that that's exactly the sort of thing that you would love to do as you left cricket, to be like to introduce some arcane system that was taken on by the ICC and still used decades later. Absolute dream areas for A. Collins.
Yeah, actually, why not? I'll do it quickly now. Here's how I fix it, right? Everyone's complaining about the 100. Very quick. I realise now it's not that complicated. Everyone's complaining that the 100 marginalised the 50 over comp, and not unreasonably, by the way. The 50 over comp, as good as it is and how much we enjoyed it, it was a lot of second team players and a lot of young players who were getting their chance because of the 100, right? So you can't have them clashing. I would start the 50 over comp. I would play half of it, say 4 of the group games, where all the players are in March, which usually is in Cape Town or Dubai or Barbados. They're all in these spring camps. They're often playing friendlies against each other anyway. Let's make them count. Let's have one group or one division based in one country and another based in another. And it can be more than just a training camp. They can get 4 games under their belt, spend the rest of, they get back to England, play a couple of weeks to finish that competition. I reckon that 50 over cricket is far more conducive to the cold than county cricket or championship cricket, because in championship cricket it's 5 degrees outside, the slips cordons all have their hand warmers in and there's not a lot of movement. In 50 over cricket, you're sprinting around the field, you're kind of keeping warm, the batters are rotating the strike through the middle overs and there'll be crowds in and it'll be a bit of a thing. So play that through the first half of April, start the county season a little bit later, play 6 games through to the end of May instead of 8, then play the blast all through June, all complete in June. In July, you've got room for 4 county rounds rather than 2, and you get those 4 county games in before August when they play the test matches. So all those complaints about no county cricket before the test series against India, that would overcome that problem. And in August, you start your marquee test series, and you have that alongside the 100. So, in other words, much as it is with the Big Bash at the moment, you play the tests and the 3 weeks that it clashes with the 100, so be it. And then you get into the back end of the county season after that. So, yes, the trade-off is there'd be no county cricket for 3 weeks in August, but you'd also have a window in isolation for 50 over cricket to start the season in some slightly different conditions, and hopefully that would improve the game too. How's that sound as a pitch?
I am not even qualified to have an opinion on how that sounds as a pitch, but I strongly suspect that people on the Discord page and will be jumping in with many opinions about that. But having the test matches and the shortest form go side by side does tend to work because you don't cannibalise. You're not really pulling the best short form players, or not many of them, out to be in a test team. I think there's one more thing we need to do on the show today before we wrap it up, because we haven't done this in quite a long time. It has been a long time since anybody heard the beautiful strains of the Happy Birthday Sachin song.
Sachin, it's your birthday. Happy birthday, Sachin. Sachin, it's your birthday. Sachin.
Take it away, Geoff.
Well, we had to come back to Sachin this week because we know that he loves wishing happy birthday to everybody he can on social media, but he went quiet for a while. He got sick, he had COVID, and then he wasn't feeling it when he came out of hospital. He was doing a bit of serious stuff about sort of Indian national pride and so on, but he wasn't doing a lot of tweeting. Times were very grim in India with the COVID pandemic, and it wasn't a time for light relief. But Sachin, this week, he's only bloody gone and done the Don. Now, the Happy Birthday Sachin model is always Sachin putting up a photo of himself with a person who he's wishing happy birthday to. I think that's a prereq. And there's not many bigger power plays in cricket than to pop up the photo of yourself taken with Don Bradman, in this case taken in front of a portrait of Don Bradman, which was maybe a power play by the Don, to be like, well, I've got this picture of me. You're allowed to have your photo taken with me in front of it. But, you know, a nice moment of the two short-statured great batsmen coming together.
Did he also acknowledge Mohammad Yusuf's birthday, which is the same day as the Don? I saw a good stat online during the week that Mohammad Yusuf's the player with the most test runs born on that day, not Don Bradman.
Oh, very good. I don't think he did, because I perused the feed pretty closely, and I don't think Sachin has got Moyo in the feed. Mohammad Yusuf getting a lot of airtime this year as Joe Root works towards that. Joe Root on 1390 test runs for the year. He's got 5 matches left to try to get to 1788, the old Captain Cook of Mohammad Yusuf.
Never thought of that.
So he's 390 runs away.
He's going to shit it in. Joe Root's going to hit 2,000 runs.
You say that, but 5 test matches, making 400 runs in 5 test matches is not a given.
It's not, but the way he's going right now. Did you watch that compilation? Yeah. Bloke's not hitting. Yeah. The bloke's just hitting the middle of the bat all day long. He'll be good. He'll be sweet. He'll be fine.
Even say he makes a ton in each of the next 2 tests. He's still got to go and make 200 runs in 3 tests in Australia. There's no guarantees. I wrote about this the other day. Like, for him to do it, he's got to have a really good start to the Ashes. He's never made 100 in Australia. He's got to go there and play as well there as he has everywhere else. And so that's what I think will be really interesting. If he breaks the record, it pretty much means that England have a competitive start to the Ashes. So, for those of us who want to see something other than another 4-0, 5-0, then we should be hoping for that, I suppose, although Australia may be cooked, as we said. Anyway, Sachin on the Don. Now, I love Sachin's tweets because have a listen to this construction. The folklore of Sir Don Bradman's batting genius is synonymous with excellence in sports.
Satch.
You will continue to inspire sports women and men forever. Thinking of you, Sir Don, on your birth anniversary. Birth anniversary. Now, it's such weird corporate non-speak, isn't it? But what does that word tell it? The folklore of Sir Don Bradman's batting genius is synonymous with excellence. What?
Is he? Do you think he's got the blower out doing them himself, a la Trump, or is this a PR agency who's clipping the ticket on the way through, and they have to throw in, they have to construct sentences that way to give the impression that they're earning their keep?
Yeah, sort of something about cromulence and embiggens the smallest man. There's quite a bit of content now, and it is content, hill of content from Sachin that's like him filming little videos around the house and so on. So I don't know if he's posting them himself, but maybe he is. But he's got to be doing it. It's not like he's being professionally shot all the time. So there's definitely an agency involved, because he was doing videos of him shaving his beard off and stuff like that, which are obviously somebody at the agency saying, "Oh, this will be good stuff for the kids. They love a TikTok. Let's do the thing where you put your hand up to the camera lens and take it away, and you look different." Ooh, but yeah, I'm not sure where the.
So just to clarify, Sachin's shooting videos of himself around the abode.
Yeah, just here, with the dog, or here's, I had gruesome stubble and I shaved it off, or here's me in the kitchen making my favourite food or whatever. Right. Yeah, he's become he's an influencer now, I suppose. But I suspect so. I don't know. I can see maybe Sachin dictating this over the phone to someone else, saying, how do we want to convey the gravitas of Don Bradman? The folklore of his genius is synonymous with excellence. Yes, that's it. That's what I want to say.
Tweet, hit send, post through it.
Hit send. Other Sachin activity included, very, very excited about Bhavanabhan Patel's silver medal in the table tennis at the Paralympics.
Oh, did you? I should give him a little shout out. Have you been watching the table tennis at the Paralympics, Geoff?
Yeah, quite a bit of it.
I would imagine. I haven't, but I would imagine that it's the very enthusiastic commentator doing it, the chap who gets very excited doing it for the host feed for ABS.
I've been getting everything off the world feed, which is I don't know who the people are who are doing it, but it hasn't been anything very notable, I'll put it that way.
Right. Well, you would know if it were Adam Bobrow, who was on the tools, because he calls table tennis, or certainly at the Olympic Games, in such a distinctive style that there's no way that you couldn't know it's him. He's kind of devoted his life to commentating table tennis. In a way, kind of reminds me of our story. Like, he's followed the sport around to be a bit of a freelance commentator. There've been like lovely pieces written about his idiosyncratic style and how much he throws himself into it, all the motion and all the rest of it. He dropped me a line after I was doing a Guardian shift talking about how great his commentary was, and he must have a Google alert set up for his name or something like that, and he tracked me down and sent me a note to say that, that he wishes me well and wants me to probably write a story about him, to which I said, maybe we will have you on the podcast at some point to talk about your story. Well, for the time being, I'm going to mention you on the podcast, Adam Bobrow. Okay. Keep up the good work.
I imagine making it to the top of the table tennis commentary game maybe isn't as crowded a field as some, but to do it with your own style is something to be proud of. So, Sachin was in there wishing happy birthday to Chiranjeevi Garu, who's an Indian actor. He was celebrating Raksha Bandhan, the festival where you celebrate brothers celebrate sisters. That's always a big part of the Sachin online year. He likes to get involved with that. World Photography Day. Sachin taking some photos on his iPhone for World Photography Day. It's good.
Hopefully not a Botham-esque photo, I hope.
No. I stumbled across that photo again during the last week while looking up pictures of Botham to put on while making the cover art for our YouTube. You never know what you find if you Google photos of Ian Botham and hit the image search. I tell you what, something comes up, so to speak. Also just loved the "I'm going to pretend it wasn't me" thing. That was hackers. Those hackers who hacked my phone to do this one specific thing. And
the Ian Botham "I was hacked" is as good as the Kumar Sangakkara "I was hacked." But I'll let you.
As good as the Greg Hunt. Greg Hunt and
Kumar's wearing his fucking whites. He was playing a game that day. It was during the bloody lunch break. I mean, he does a lot of great things for the game. But the "I was hacked," and that they just posted one photo and then never did anything further.
It could happen to anyone. It could happen to anyone. I think there should be a long German word for the moment of fear when you hit tweet and then think, what if I attach the wrong image? I think that's an experience that many people could relate to. Final Sachin work, quite a few tweets about the Indian Test at Lords. No tweets about Headlingley. That was interesting. Yeah, not sure why that was.
That might have been an appropriate YouTube strategy for us. Just do videos when India do well and your YouTube following will swell. Don't do videos. Do not bother doing videos when India don't do well, because no one will fucking watch them.
There will still be a very small number of passionate England supporters who will watch. I also liked that Sachin retweeted something that someone had sent him on Indian Independence Day, which noted that before he went out to bat for the last time in Test cricket, he was on 15,847 runs. So if Sachin had made a duck in his last innings, a la the Don, which is where we started, his career total would have been 15,847. Indian independence was achieved on the 15th of August, 1947. Sachin's runs would have been, like, if you were some sort of hyper far-right Indian nationalist, there would be nothing you would love more than having Sachin's career runs being the date of Indian independence. It couldn't have been more perfect propaganda-wise.
Yeah, my birthday as well, 15th of the 8th. So what is it? So it's Indian Independence Day, my birthday, and VJ Day. There are the things that happen on 15 August. It's not too dissimilar from the Alex Stewart 8463. So he finished with 8,463 runs, and his birth date is the 8th of April 1963, which has to be the best cricket stat, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, of all the stuff we've come up with, that is the greatest. It's right there alongside Bannerman, I'd go as far to say.
There was also Sachin posting with Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits. I think that's come up before. I seem to remember that must be on the annual cycle. Yeah. Sachin hanging out with some tigers on safari.
Maybe it's not, by the way. I don't think we've been doing Happy Birthday Sachin for 12 months, which would suggest that you've definitely raised the Knopfler photo before. Mm-hmm. So that might be sort of veering into worn areas. Moment. Well, I'm just thinking worn areas. You know how Warren has a number of selfies of himself from years gone by that he pops up at different intervals. I mean, if you go back through the Instagram feed, if you really, really want to, and you want to do a deep dive on this, there are some familiar photos, some familiar selfies that he must like quite a bit that get a run quite often.
Botham style, or
yeah, not Botham style, prawn in. But the point I'm making is that maybe the Knopfler photo is
or Botham style.
The Knopfler photo is the equivalent of a worn selfie that had just the right lighting that's been posted 6 times on Instagram stories or whatever.
Right.
And thus why it keeps getting a Guernsey in the Twitter feed for Sachin.
And the last bit that I particularly liked was Sachin pumping up Suresh Raina's book written by Bharat Sundaresan. So nice for Bharat to get some airtime on the Sachin RT feed.
Good
Probably
for business.
sold about 10,000 books off that tweet alone.
I was going to say, I mean, has there ever been, Bharat writing Dhoni, then Raina's biographies, talk about guaranteed bestseller stuff. So I'm sure he's done a sterling job, and I look forward to reading it, and we'll probably get him on the show to talk about Suresh Raina's book at some point. But that's money for old rope for a writer as gifted as Bharat to tell the story of a cricketer, or a couple of cricketers that have won World Cups for India.
So that's the story of Happy Birthday Sachin for another however long it will be until we do it again.
Beautiful. Thank you, Geoff. I think it's time. It's 25 to 1 that my late night expedition comes to an end. Thank yous, as always. Thank you to Brick Lane for their wonderful support of what we're doing here on The Final Word. As I mentioned in the middle of the show, check them out on social media, pick up one of their beers, take a photo with it. That'd be nice. Thank you to everybody who's involved with us on Patreon. We have just edged ahead of Jimmy Anderson again. This is getting kind of ridiculous that we have now overtaken James Anderson on the final day of the month, which means that when we hit 1 September, indeed we hit 1 September 35 minutes ago in the UK, so we'll be able to check this, but we might do it before the weekend.
I think it's American Pacific time.
Oh, right. A few more hours of being ahead of James Anderson. So at the moment, Geoff, we're on 6:35 or something.
6:35. We've opened up a lead, but we do tend to lose some at the end of the month, or people go on pause when their cards aren't renewed and so on. So Jimmy on 6:29, I suspect will be in front in 24 hours or so when the cycle goes through.
Yeah, so we'll get to overtake him again, Groundhog Day style, or another flick I saw recently, which is almost a knockoff of Groundhog Day, I think it's called Palm Beach or something like that.
It's Palm Springs.
It's a great movie. I can recommend it. It is brilliant film. Brilliant film.
Well, it's not a knockoff so much as a conscious extension of the idea of the Groundhog Day idea,
right? Which
is, what if you don't get out of it? What if that's just how things are, and it's a story that happens within that loop? And I watched it during the lockdown last year. Admittedly, I think I watched it in hotel quarantine in Brisbane, so I was probably pretty emotional anyway. But I found it highly emotional, highly moving, very funny. I loved it. Palm Springs.
Yeah, I think we watched it in one of our lockdowns here as well. While we're doing recommendations, Mr. Corman on Apple is brilliant. If you're a Joseph Gordon-Levitt fan, which I am way back.
Yeah.
Do it.
The story of how Matthias Corman got to be the head of the whatever
OECD. Yeah. No, nothing to do with that.
The plucky story of an underdog who rose from nothing to become the head of the OECD.
Yeah, who lied through his teeth when trying to garner votes for that position by pretending he gave a fuck about climate change after being part of a government that went out of their way to dismantle every bit of work that was put into an emissions trading scheme. Yeah, that guy. No, not him, but it's a good show. Right, where are we up to? We're thanking people. We've thanked Brick Lane. We've thanked our patrons. We'll thank them again. You make not only what we do viable, but also lovely, especially on the Discord channel. I'm sorry I've been a bit absent on there recently. It's not you, it's me. I'll return more in the weeks to come to organise our game on the 17th of September, if nothing else. So
you make it possible. You make my dreams come true. Ooh.
Talking about Joe Gordon-Levitt, of course, in 500 Days of Summer, when he's dancing around singing that song in a nice little musical montage. Anyway, thank you to everybody who has been watching us on YouTube and subscribed there. There have been quite a few of you who've migrated over there to watch our daily podcast. They'll start again on day 1 of the Test match at the Oval, which I will actually be at the Oval. A number of people have asked me, why are you always at the Oval? I'm like, well, that's quite a long story, which I can't be bothered explaining, but I will be at the Oval.
It's a court order it's part of his residential detention program. He's not allowed to leave the bounds of the Oval.
Yeah, I do spend a lot of time
His
there.
ankle bracelet goes off.
But I will be there this week as well, broadcasting that test match, that fourth test match of the series. So we'll be there doing that. And to everybody who rates and reviews us on the various podcast apps, that helps when it comes to charts and those sorts of things that are kind of boring on the outside, but actually do make quite a big difference to who find the show on the various different podcast suppliers, be it Apple or Spotify or whatever else. Thank you, Geoff, for getting up early. A quick turnaround for you today, having gone to bed at stupid o'clock as always, to be able to do this for me at the other end of the day. And thank you to our editing team from Bad Producer Productions, not least Dave Collins, who does what he does for us a couple of times a week. Jay Muller, Astrid Edwards, the team at BPP. Check out what they do. Their link is in the show notes. They make lots of great podcasts. And I think that's it. Thank you for listening. This has been The Final Word with Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon. We'll be back with the daily shows in a couple of days from the Oval. Till then, farewell.
You make my dreams come true.
I had to go.